So I was thinking about this, and I think I talked about this yesterday. I think I brought it up with Max during a segment. We didn't take calls on it yesterday. Tommy and I talked about it a little bit yesterday on the podcast. I was thinking that if it actually does get to a holdout situation, like there really hasn't been a major great player since Cousins, and Cousins, was a good quarterback. But the contract stuff hasn't been part of our, off-season discussion with, the potential for, two sides at odds and a potential holdout in a long time. I mean, I guess you could talk about the Trent Williams situation, but that situation was really different. We were talking about cancer and whose fault it was that it wasn't diagnosed correctly, et cetera. There was a lot going on there. But this would be a legitimate holdout. I mean, Terry's not coming to camp without a contract extension. He didn't show up for mini camp, so I would assume he's not going to come to training camp without a contract extension. I do believe that this current situation, which everybody's reported on, all the national guys have reported on, they're far apart. Terry's side isn't happy with the way negotiations have gone. That was Jeremy Fowler from this weekend. I do think there's a really good chance that this is more about how we're going to see Adam Peters and company handle these delicate contract negotiations stylistically. It's kind of the way they handled it in San Francisco. They waited it out. They thought waiting made more sense, perhaps created more leverage. And then ultimately they would get deals done. And so I think it's more about style than a massive divide. But let's just play the hypothetical July 8th sports talk segment game. What if we do get to the beginning of training camp and there isn't a deal and Terry holds out? We just talked about that with Grant Paulson, and Grant, added, and this is important, how much context we would have in the moment would matter in terms of how we feel, right? If Terry's asking for a Jamar Chase or a Justin Jefferson contract, then that's just not where he is, both in terms of the type of player he is and where he would slot among wide receivers. And by the way, his age, both of those guys are 25 years old. And they are two high-level, elite wide receivers who will probably be in the top 10 to top 15 of all players in the league. When we see, the top 100 list that the NFL.com players list, it's been coming out in, we'll get to that maybe next hour in terms of which players are on the list so far. I think they're into the 80s in the countdown from 100 to 1. But if we, had information that Terry was asking for, $35 million or more per year, and some sort of, 4-year, $150 or $140 million deal, I think that would hurt Terry with fans. But if we also found out, but you're flipping it around, that Terry was asking for a DK Metcalf deal, $33 million average annual, we'll stick to the average annual rather than getting into the years and, guarantees, the practical guarantees or the aggregate value of the contract. And, that he thinks he compares favorably to DK Metcalf, and the team is offering something close to, say, Brandon Ayuk, at 29, 30 million, then maybe we would be, on Terry's side. So when we get there, if there's information, and by the way, you won't always be able to believe some of that reporting, that would perhaps really impact the way we thought. But right now, I'm just curious, first blush, if we get to the July 22nd, the opening of camp, July 22nd or 25th, 22nd is rookies, 25th is veterans. I think that's what it is. Anyway, if we get to that and there's no deal and there is a holdout of Terry McLaurin, whose side are you going to be on? 301-230-0980. I'm going to tell you right now, I think I'd be on the team side. I think this is a delicate contract. We talked about it right from the beginning when the first report came out that Terry wasn't happy with the way things have gone. By the way, he hasn't, asked permission to seek a trade partner. We haven't gotten that. I don't think we'll get that. It doesn't seem like his style necessarily. It might be the agent style. Who knows? But I don't think we'll get that. Um, I do have a lot of benefit of the doubt and a lot of equity that they have built up with me over a year. I mean, going into this era, I was benefit of the doubt, Kev, because it had been so long with, not being able to give this organization, anybody in it, the benefit of the doubt. They never earned it. And it was like, let's see what happens with Josh Harrison with the ownership group. And then, and then they hired Adam Peters. And then they hired Dan Quinn. I think they had a really good, those were the first big moves because 2023 was not their team. They couldn't put an ownership imprint on that particular team. We had to live out the Ron Rivera 2023 experience with Sam Howell, et cetera, in that just horrific season. But right when it started, it's like they got the top GM candidate. They got a head coach that they really wanted. Yes, that's who they really wanted. And by the way, what a staff and what a front office. And so, benefit of the doubt for me also took place when they drafted Jaden Daniels at number 2, because that's what I wanted them to do. And then all of a sudden, by the way, in the first year, they win 12 games, 2 playoff games, and they're within 60 minutes of going to the Super Bowl. So I would trust what they're doing. Now, some might say, you haven't been overwhelmed with their offseason. No, I'm going to take each move and I'm going to give you my thoughts on each move. And there isn't anything that they've done defensively that says to me, wow, they added talent that will upgrade the defense. And that was the biggest issue last year. Now, I do give a lot of room for the possibility of year 2 in the same system with the current players and the few players that they've added for the defense to improve. I mean, defense just behaves that way. There's not a lot of, there's just much more variance year to year with defense than there is with offense. But I don't want them to set a bad precedent with a 10, 15, 20% above retail deal. This is a tricky deal because of his age and because, as I've said before, Terry's a top 10 receiver. He's not a top 5 receiver. He just isn't, in my opinion. When you finish 19th in receptions, 15th in yards, 32nd in average yards per catch, you're not a top 5 wide receiver. You just aren't. He had his best year. He had 13 touchdowns, second in the league to Jamar Chase. He is great with contested catches. He's great in the clutch. I love Terry McLaurin. He's a really good wide receiver. We've been through this a million times. He's not Chase. He's not Jefferson. He's not A.J. Brown. I used to think he was every bit of CeeDee Lamb. I still do. I think CeeDee Lamb's overrated. I don't think he's Amon-Ra St. Brown. I think he's in that category of, there are like 7 to 10 guys that are somewhere between, 7 and 14, somewhere in that range, which is fine. It's a loaded position in this league. It's incredibly deep. The DK Metcalf deal was an outlier. To give him $33 million a year. Now he's younger. He's 2 years younger than Terry, 2.5 years younger. To give him, 4 years, $33 million average annual. Now they gave him $60 million guaranteed, just so everybody understands about the guaranteed money with Metcalf's deal. But the average annual seems a little bit out of whack for DK Metcalf. Although I'm a DK Metcalf fan, I think he is capable at times of dominating a game in the same way the bigger, stronger receivers do it. A.J. Brown does it, on occasion. Mike Evans does it on occasion. But I think I would trust the team, and I would be on the team's side to do the right thing. I would also, day by day, be open to changing my mind, because I will tell you this. that what we talked about, what Grant and I talked about at the end, is important here. You don't want your first big contract situation to be this tricky situation because he's 30, going to be 30. Where does he really slot? But at the same time, it's Terry McLaurin. This guy is first class. He is a leader. He's so respected by everybody in that organization, everybody in that locker room. You can't, and I don't think they would treat him poorly in negotiations. I don't think that's the case. But you can't leave with the perception that you're not taking care of him. So it makes it hard. But I think to start, I would be on the team's side and I would trust that the team knows what it's doing.